Hi guys, this is Miss Meyer with another episode of the Miss Meyer Show. I'd like to begin by thanking my beautiful daughter Isabel for doing my makeup today. That's why I look so lovely. So what we're going to talk about today is a political process. And we're going to talk about how this whole deal that has to do with politics. So when a political process, which we're going to discuss, the first thing is about voters. Voting is a very, very, very big integral part of being an American citizen, and I don't think enough people use that right. We, have the right to vote, and sadly, a majority of people do not do that. Voters evaluate information presented in political campaigns to make reasoned choices among candidates. Basically saying that voters make the choice, a knowledgeable choice, for whichever candidate they wish to have. Why don't you sit on here and just like, there you go. Am I in the shot? Okay. Now, the media plays a really big role in who we choose to be, our next senator, president, or whatever. And like I said before, the media is a huge factor in who we decide and choose on. The media evaluates campaign speeches, literature, and advertisements by separating facts from opinion, detecting biases, evaluating sources, and identifying propaganda. These are all things that the media does. Now, and when I say media, I just don't mean television. I mean newspaper, magazines, books, YouTube. I told you not to do that in here anyway.
Just do it on this side.
Yeah, but you're hitting it over here. No. All right. Now, mass media roles in elections are really big. That's your big news people like MSNBC, Fox News, CBS, NBC. All of these big mass media things are influential in the electoral process. All right. Now, they also emphasize selected issues. When candidates are running on a platform, their issues. What did I just... They also, like I said, they emphasize selected issues like education, healthcare, and things like that. The media really brings it home. Before there was the media, it was just really... Well, it was always the media, but before television, really, elections were very different. Once television came along with the... and one of the first televised debates was between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. It changed politics forever. People could see their candidates rather than before. Before, when you wanted to see your candidate, you would watch like a newsreel. Instead of previews, you know how you go to the show or the movies and you see previews of other movies? There would be like the news. You would watch, the news would come up and you could see things on there. People didn't have televisions. Once televisions came into people's homes, like in the 50s, and they started to really televise political things, it changed politics forever. The televised debate between Nixon and Kennedy is amazing. And what's really cool about this is because here you see Kennedy, and he is, he's really cool guy. He's just, doing a really great job. And then you see Nixon, who's sweating profusely and getting all tripped up and, can't handle the stress and the pressure. It really changed politics. And now, when we have an election and we have debates and things like that, it's all televised. You can watch it on the iPad. You can watch it on TV. Media plays a huge role in politics. It gets everything out there. The internet, YouTube, these things are instantaneously. Yeah, instantaneously gets things out there. I mean, it just it revitalized the whole way politics works. Running for political office costs a lot of money. campaign costs, I mean, it costs money. Like during an election, it was just the mayoral election here in New Orleans. There were signs all over the place. Those signs cost money. They need to pay for these signs to be created and things like that. The people who work on these campaigns, some of them get paid. You need to pay your campaign manager, pay your PR guy. You got to pay for the advertisements that you have on TV. That all costs money. Now, how do they get this money? How do they get this money to do this? Well, remember we talked last video about the PACs, the political action committees. Now, their job is just to raise money for these political campaigns. They also require candidates they do fundraising activities. Like, just let's say, for instance, that I'm a teacher, right? Okay, you guys know that. And let's just say that, Sally Smith is running for president, and her platform is to raise teacher pay to like $80,000 a year. Well, I'm a teacher. I would love that. So I'm going to invest in Sally Smith's campaign. I'm going to give her some money so that she can campaign and win, because I agree with what she stands for. Okay, so that's how they do that. They get these campaign funds. Now, I wouldn't be able to submit much money to Sally Smith because I am only a teacher, but big corporations and big time people with lots of money also submit money to campaigns because they want a candidate who is favorable to their ideals to win. Okay, another thing that helps raise the campaign money are groups. Let's say that there's a candidate, Joe Johnson, and Joe Johnson wants to end animal testing. Well, you can believe it that PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, is going to invest hugely in his campaign because they agree with what he believes in. They have similar views. So they invest in these candidates. Individual people can invest. Huge corporations, groups, special interest groups, lobbyists, they all invest in a candidate. And it's usually the candidate that they agree with or, have similar ideas. All right. The problem that this does, the problem that, running for office, the problem of how much it costs, is it really limits the people who can run. You might have somebody who would be a great governor, a great senator, or a great president, but because it costs so much money to run for political office, very few people do it. You've got to be pretty wealthy to run for political office these days. I don't know of anyone who's kind of like, poor and decided to become president. That hasn't happened. I mean, I'm sure that it does not say that it can't happen. I'm saying that it hasn't happened. Some people want to change the way running elections is done. They want to do this by going after the money it takes to run elections. And these people are called campaign finance reform. And they want to make it so that everybody can run for political office. Because I'm telling you right now, if I were to go run for political office, I would not have the money to do it. And I just wouldn't have I couldn't do it. So the campaign finance laws were put into place to put limits on how much a person can get donated to them by specific individuals. Like it's saying, some people are billionaires and donate to political campaigns, like Bill Gates, Donald Trump. They're millionaires. They can contribute millions of dollars to specific candidates. So the campaign finance reform put a limit to how much money can be donated to a specific candidate. Now, there are loopholes and ways to get around it, but those laws are in place. Okay? Now let's talk about voting. Now, when I turned 18, I didn't vote. I should have, but I didn't. I didn't vote until I was in my 20s. And because that was, it was a big deal to me when I became, went to college and started taking classes about, history really big time. I really became aware that it was my right and my responsibility to be a good citizen to vote. I always say, because some people, especially my husband,
No.
all right, I had to tear in put new batteries in because my camera died. All right, so voting, like I said, is a very important. Like I was saying before, my husband always, we're on completely different political ideals. We are different political parties. I'm not going to tell you which one, who is who. But we don't agree on politics at all. Very much. We don't agree really on very much anything as far as that goes. Like, okay, he's a big meat eater. I'm a vegan, we are different with the way we, discipline the girls and things like that. But we're just completely opposites. But it works, so it's good. So, anyways, I always tell him that he has no right to complain or to say anything about our government if he doesn't go out and vote. So it's a really big, important thing. Now, voting is a basic responsibility of citizenship. Voter registration is something that you need to do in order to be able to vote. When you turn 18, you get a little card and you fill it out, and it gives you the ability to vote. The number of citizens who register and to vote is related to how important election issues are to citizens. And if you're wondering what I'm reading from, I'm reading directly from Study Island, the lessons and stuff like that. Put it down. Because, like I said, Study Island is the best place for you to prepare for the leap. Okay? So only citizens who register can participate in primary and general elections. So if you don't register to vote, if you've never registered and filled out your card, you can't go vote. You can go, you're not going to be able to go. You can go to the polling place and try and vote, but they're going to tell you to go home because you're not registered. You need to register to do that. And it's so easy to do it now. Just go to a website, or you can fill out the little card, either one. Qualifications to register to vote. You have to be a citizen of the United States. You need to be a resident of the state and the precinct where you're going to be voting. So, like, I can't go to Baton Rouge and go vote. I can't do that. I have to vote here in my parish. Like I told you guys before, when I voted in the presidential election, the last presidential election, I was living in Texas and I could not vote, and I was coming home to Louisiana to visit, and I wasn't going to be in Texas when it was time to vote, so I had to do an absentee ballot. And do you remember that, Belle? I brought you in there and you got to push the button.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you remember that?
That was the best part of my day.
That was, I was going to be in, I was not going to be there, so I went and did absentee ballot in Texas, in Dallas, because I wouldn't be able to do it here in Louisiana. You have to vote where you're residing, your residence, okay? And you need to be 18 years old by the day of the general election. So sadly, none of you can vote yet, but you will be able to vote soon. And it's very, very important to have a idea of what the candidates are talking about and what their, issues and their stance is. And one thing I really, really, really want to drive home to you guys is that come up with your own ideas. Like I said, my husband and I have completely different ideas on politics. We're different political parties. everything's different. But we raise our girls to make that decision for themselves. That, okay, I want, my daughters to look at, what the candidate is saying. What are they running on? And make that decision for themselves. Don't go off of what I believe or what I feel or what Daddy thinks or that. So I really, really encourage you guys to make your own knowledgeable decisions and opinions about politics. All right. So factors in predicting which citizens will vote. Education. Statistically, the more educated a person is, the more likely they are to vote. Age. Older people are more likely to vote than young people. And income. People who have a higher income are more likely to vote than people who have a lower income. And that doesn't mean that poor, young, uneducated people don't vote. That just means that this is statistically what we have, according to census records and voting polls, what it has looked like. Why citizens fail to vote. Lack of interest is a big one. And in this last election between President Obama and I'm drawing a blank. What was his name? Oh my gosh.
Mitt Romney?
Mitt Romney, thank you. Oh, she's so smart. Between them, there was a big push to get young people out to vote. It was a huge push. And there was a big thing called Rock the Vote that MTV did. And just they're really trying to get the young people out there to vote. Because there's a lot of young people here in this country that do not vote. And they were really trying to push that. I know that there was like the first ever debate or something on YouTube, and they were taking YouTube questions. I mean, that's really, trying to gear towards young people. So they were trying to make it interesting so that 28, that age demographic between 18 to 25 would go out and vote. Okay? The percentage of voters who participate in presidential elections is usually greater than the percentage of voters who participate in state and local elections. Lots of people don't even go vote for their local elections, and you really should. It's very, very important because your local and your state really affect you more. They have a lot of autonomy. Your state is, and so that you should definitely vote in your state and local elections because they impact you the most. All right, now we're going to talk about the political process and the Electoral College. And this is super confusing, but I'm going to cover it now and we're going to go over it more in class. All right, when we elect someone to be president, and let me grab some examples here. I'm in Belle's room, and I'm looking for some Barbies to use that have clothes on because we've got quite a few naked ones over here.
Those are my sisters. Don't not mine.
Yeah, okay.
I don't play
That's
with
why
Barbies.
they're in her room.
I don't play with them. You made me put them in here.
Right. All right. So let's just say that. What else do we have here? Let's just say. Okay, I'll use me. I'll just use me. Okay, let's see. And this really smells good.
It used to.
It's almost out. It smells good. Anyways, let's say this girl right here is running for president. She's running for president here. Now, the way that they run for president... Oh, we gotta have another person. Let me grab another toy.
Use the penguin.
Okay, yeah, we like him too. All right, let's say these two people are running for president. We got
And a person.
Music. Her name is Music. We got Music here. She's running for president. And
Penguin.
what's his name?
Mr. Penguin.
Mr. Penguin here. They're running for president. Now, the one who wins is the one who gets the most electoral votes. The president is not determined by a popular election. And this is a huge scandal, and there's lots of talk about this. Everybody has an opinion, but that's the way it is. So, let's just say there's 12 billion people as on Earth. Let's say there's, research tell me how many people in the United States. There's a bunch of people in the United States, okay? So, it doesn't matter if the majority of people in the United States select one person. That person does not become president unless they get the majority of electoral votes, okay? It's crazy. A lot of people are up in arms and are against it, but just that's the way it is. Now, each state has what we call electors, all right? Find out how many electors Louisiana has, because I don't remember.
I'm getting there.
Okay. I'm looking on here. I don't know off the top of my head how many electors. I think it was like 8.
There's 313.9 million people in the U.S.
Okay,
from 2012.
All right, we have 313 million people in the United States.
0.9.
If the
if
the majority of them select a specific candidate, then it doesn't matter unless they win the electoral votes. However, if the majority of people select a specific candidate, they're going to win the majority of electoral votes.
Electors in Louisiana?
Yes. Now, each state has what we call electors. Now, electors are numbers or votes, really. Now, Louisiana has, that's what I thought. Louisiana has 8 electors, meaning we have 8 votes that we give during an election. The bigger the state, the more electors they have. Okay? So a big state like California has, I think, like 38 electors, or has a lot. Texas has a lot. New York has a lot. So smaller states have less. So that's why during a campaign, people go after these big number states. You see them kind of avoiding places like, I don't know, Minnesota, Missouri, things like that, because they don't have a lot of electors. Because the number of people, they want the number of electors, because the person who wins president is the one who gets the most electors. Now, how do you get electors for that state? The majority, okay, let's just say in Louisiana. So we have here Mr. Penguin and we have music. So if the majority of people in Louisiana vote for Mr. Penguin, then Mr. Penguin gets all of Louisiana's electoral votes, okay? So that is the number, all right? So, yeah. There are 538 electors, and the person who gets the most wins, basically. So these candidates want to get the electors. Now, I really don't need these other Barbies, because I don't need them now. But, like I said, the majority,
Those would be the electors.
Yeah. All right. So if Mr. Penguin won all of the electors in Louisiana, he would get, let's pretend these are 8 electoral votes. Now, if music won all of the electors in California, let's pretend these are 38, she would get 38 electoral votes. And the one who got the most towards the end wins. Okay? That's how it's run. A lot of people say it shouldn't be that way. It should be, by popular vote only. But that's, that's just the way it is. A lot of people are up in arms about that. Okay, so I'm just going to read to you the last couple of parts. They have, on election day, citizens can cast their vote. However, it is the vote only of the electors in the electoral college, like what I just said, that ultimately decides the result. On the Monday following the second Wednesday in December, all the electors meet at their state capital to cast their vote. If there is a tie, then the House of Representatives is responsible for deciding the next president. I don't think there's ever been a tie. I really don't. I have a really good, actually, Belle has a really good book about presidents. Where is it? That's somewhere. I don't know.
I kill myself in Flappy Bird so I can find it.
It's somewhere. Don't worry about that. Okay, but I'll have to look in there and see. And maybe there was, but I don't think that there was.
There was like the.
I don't think so.
I forgot what it's called.
All right. She's studying the president. Oh, she's studied the presidents for academic games. Some of you have never heard of academic games. If there's a tie, then the House of Representatives is responsible for deciding the next president. The winner is then announced and sworn into office. Citizens' votes do still count because the electors typically, doesn't say always, it says typically vote for the candidate who has received the most votes in his or her state. Okay? So that's the way it goes.
So even
all right.
They have
so I'm going to read you this. No questions. No question. You can ask me when I'm finished doing this. They don't want to have to sit and listen to your questions because it's long enough anyway. I'm sorry. Go cry like Kate did.
Okay.
All right. The 2000 election is an example of how tricky the electoral college process can be. Just because a candidate gets the most votes by popular vote does not mean he or she will win the election. Rather than the result being based on popular votes, it is based on electoral votes, just like what I said. For example, each state holds a certain number of electoral votes. This depends on population. Everything I just said. I live in a madhouse. The greater the population of a state, the more electoral votes they received. For this instance, California has many more electoral votes than Rhode Island. In 2000, Al Gore won the popular vote, meaning the majority of people in the United States voted for Al Gore to be our president. This means that the more people in America voted for Al Gore. However, George W. Bush won the election. This is because he won more electoral votes. So that's, you know, a lot of people were up in arms about that. That's all I've got today for you guys. I will go over the Electoral College again in class on Tuesday. That's all I got, pretty much. And I also want to send out a personal safety announcement. If you're playing Flappy Birds, calm down, maybe do some meditation, some yoga.
Sadly, they removed it from the App Store.
Yeah, because people are losing their minds, and I just don't want you guys to be one of them.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
all right.
losing my mind.
All right, so see you guys later. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. That completes the opening statements, and now the candidates will answer questions or comment upon one another's answers to questions put by correspondents of the networks. The correspondents.
I'm Sander Van Oker, NBC News.
I'm Charles Warren, Mutual News.
I'm Stuart Novins, CBS News.
Bob Fleming, ABC News.
The first question to Senator Kennedy from Mr. Fleming.
Senator, the Vice President in his campaign has said that you are naive and at times immature. He has raised the question of leadership. On this issue, why do you think people should vote for you rather than the Vice President?
Well, the Vice President and I came to the Congress together. 1946, we both served in the Labor Committee. I've been there now for 14 years, the same period of time that he has. So that our experience in government is comparable. Secondly, I think the question is, what are the programs that we advocate? What is the party record that we lead? I come out of the Democratic Party, which in this century has produced Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, and which supported and sustained these programs which I've discussed tonight. Mr. Nixon comes out of the Republican Party. He was nominated by it. And it is a fact that through most of these last 25 years, the Republican leadership has opposed federal aid for education, medical care for the aged, development of the Tennessee Valley, development of our natural resources. I think Mr. Nixon is an effective leader of his party. I hope he would grant me the same. The question before us is, which point of view and which party do we want to lead the United States?
Mr. Nixon, would you like to comment on that statement?
I have no comment.
The next question to Vice President Nixon from Mr. Van Oker.
Mr. Vice President, since the question of executive leadership is a very important campaign issue, I'd like to follow Mr. Novin's question. Now, Republican campaign slogans, you'll see them on signs around the country as we did last week, say, it's experience that counts. That's over a picture of yourself, sir. Implying that you've had more governmental, executive decision-making experience than your opponent. Now, in his news conference on August 24th, President Eisenhower was asked to give one example of a major idea of yours that he adopted. His reply was, and I'm quoting, "If you give me a week, I might think of one. I don't remember." Now, that was a month ago, sir, and the President hasn't brought it up since. And I'm wondering, sir, if you can clarify which version is correct, the one put out by Republican campaign leaders or the one put out by President Eisenhower?
Well, I would suggest, Mr. Van Oker, that if you know the President, that was probably a facetious remark. I would also suggest that insofar as his statement is concerned, that I think it would be improper for the President of the United States to disclose the instances in which members of his official family had made recommendations, as I have made them through the years, to him which he has accepted or rejected. The President has always maintained, and very properly so, that he is entitled to get what advice he wants from his cabinet and from his other advisors without disclosing that to anybody, including, as a matter of fact, the Congress. Now, I can only say this. Through the years, I have sat in the National Security Council. I have been in the cabinet. I have met with the legislative leaders. I have met with the President when he made the great decisions with regard to Lebanon, Quemoy Matsu, other matters. The President has asked for my advice. I have given it. Sometimes my advice has been taken. Sometimes it is not. I do not say that I have made the decisions. And I would say that no President should ever allow anybody else to make the major decisions. The President only makes the decisions. All that his advisors do is to give counsel when he asks for it. As far as what experience counts and whether that is experience that counts, that isn't for me to say. I can only say that my experience is there for the people to consider. Senator Kennedy's is there for the people to consider. As he pointed out, we came to the Congress in the same year. His experience has been different from mine, Mine has been in the executive branch. His has been in the legislative branch. I would say that the people now have the opportunity to evaluate his as against mine, and I think both he and I are going to abide by whatever the people decide.
Senator Kennedy?
Well, I'll just say that the question is of experience, and the question also is what our judgment is of the future, and what our goals are for the United States, and what ability we have to implement those goals. Abraham Lincoln came to the presidency in 1860 after a rather little-known session in the House of Representatives, and after being defeated for the Senate in 58 and was a distinguished president. There is no certain road to the presidency. There are no guarantees that if you take one road or another that you will be a successful president. I have been in the Congress for 14 years. I have voted in the last 8 years, and the Vice President was presiding over the Senate and meeting his other responsibilities. I have met decisions over 800 times on matters which affect not only the domestic security of the United States, but as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The question really is which candidate and which party can meet the problems that the United States is going to face in the 60s.
Mr. Vanocur's question for Vice President Nixon.
Mr. Vice President, in one of your earlier statements, you said, we've moved ahead, we've built more schools, we've built more hospitals. Now, sir, isn't it true that the building of more schools is a local matter for financing? Were you claiming that the Eisenhower administration was responsible for the building of these schools, or is it the local school districts that provide for them?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, your question brings out a point that I'm very glad to make. Too often, in appraising whether we are moving ahead or not, we think only of what the federal government is doing. Now, that isn't the test of whether America moves. The test of whether America moves is whether the federal government, plus the state government, plus the local government, plus the biggest segment of all, individual enterprise, moves. We have, for example, a gross national product of approximately $500 billion. Roughly $100 billion to $125 billion of that is the result of government activity. $400 billion, approximately, is a result of what individuals do. Now, the reason the Eisenhower administration has moved, the reason that we've had the funds, for example, locally, to build the schools and the hospitals and the highways, to make the progress that we have, is because this administration has encouraged individual enterprise. And it has resulted in the greatest expansion of the private sector of the economy that has ever been witnessed in an 8-year period. And that is growth. That is the growth that we are looking for. It is the growth that this administration has supported and that its policies have stimulated.
Senator Kennedy?
Well, I must say, I think the reason that the schools have been constructed is because the local school districts were willing to increase the property taxes to a tremendously high figure, and in my opinion, almost to the point of diminishing returns in order to sustain these schools. Secondly, I think we have a rich country, and I think we have a powerful country. I think what we have to do, however, is have the president and the leadership set before our country exactly what we must do in the next decade if we're going to maintain our security in education, in economic growth, in development of natural resources. The Soviet Union is making great gains. It isn't enough to compare what might have been done 8 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 20 years ago. I want to compare what we're doing with what our adversaries are doing, so that by the year 1970, the United States is ahead in education, in health, in building, in homes, in economic strength. I think that's the big assignment, the big task, the big function of the federal government.
Hey, Sarah. Hey, Joe. Today we're going to learn about something called the Electoral College. Good guess, Joe, but it's not an actual college. It's part of our election process that was put in place by the framers of our Constitution at the Constitutional Convention of 1787. See, our forefathers didn't want to let Congress alone decide who should be president. But they were worried that if they left it up to the people to decide, most would vote for their local candidate. Obviously, this gave an unfair advantage to the larger states. They wanted the smaller states to have a more equal voice, which meant they needed to come up with a better system. They found the solution in ancient Rome. Romans didn't want the rich to have too much power, so they divided their male citizens into groups of 100 according to wealth, and each group received only one vote. This system was called the Centurial Assembly. It was this ideal of fair representation that our founding fathers used to create the Electoral College system in the United States, which gives each state a number of elected representatives, called electors, who formally select the President and Vice President of the United States. The number of electors in each state equals the number of its congressional senators, which is always 2, plus the number of its congressional representatives, which is different for each state and depends on its population. Over time, the Electoral College has evolved a bit. Though the method for choosing electors has changed several times, it is still basically the same. So here's what a lot of people don't really understand, maybe not even your parents. When people next vote for President of the United States in what is sure to be an exciting 2008 election, what they're really doing is voting for electors who have pledged to vote for a particular set of candidates. Ballots in some states make it clear that voters are actually voting for electors who cast the official votes for President and Vice President. Article 2 of the Constitution says that each state shall appoint electors in a manner determined by the state legislature. That means that it's up to each state's legislature to decide how electors are selected. In some states, electors are selected by registered voters in an election that occurs several months before the presidential election. In other states, electors are selected by elected officials in the state's political party, such as the state party's executive committee. Typically, electors are individuals who are loyal to their political party and pledge to vote for their party's nominees for president and vice president. Here's the catch. Sometimes the electoral votes produce a different outcome than the nationwide popular vote. Way. In fact, this has happened a few times in our history, but never was it more dramatic than during the 2000 election, which was the closest presidential election in U.S. history. That's the one. Now, we all know who won that election. Almost. It was George W. Bush, who ultimately became president, but it was one bumpy roller coaster of a ride. As the vote wound down, both candidates had close to the number of electoral votes needed to win. It was neck and neck, and it all came down to one final state, Florida. Things weren't looking so sunny for one of the candidates as the newscasters, in bold fashion, claimed a victor. Watch. Although newscasters first named Gore the winner, a few hours later they did a turnaround, declaring Bush the winner. Gore even called to congratulate Mr. Bush. An hour later, he took it back. This was getting better than any movie you could imagine. Anyway, here's how it all played out. Once Florida's count was complete, each candidate had 49% of the popular vote. Out of more than 6 million Florida votes, Bush was ahead by fewer than 2,000 votes. With the vote that close, according to Florida law, a recount was necessary. The election outcome was delayed for over a month, as the entire country waited anxiously. Finally, after several recounts and lawsuits, the U.S. Supreme Court declared that recounting ballots was unconstitutional and said Florida could certify its vote. They did, and on January 6, 2001, Congress met to certify the electoral vote. And so with 271 electoral votes to Gore's 266, George W. Bush narrowly became the 43rd president of these United States. Gore won the nationwide popular vote by more than 500,000. But Mr. Bush had more electoral votes, and that made the difference. You might wonder how it's possible for one candidate to win the nationwide popular vote, but not win enough electoral votes to be elected president. Well, it's possible because all but 2 states have a winner-take-all system, which means that the candidate who receives the most popular votes in the state receives all of that state's electoral votes, even if the difference in statewide popular votes is very small. That's what happened in 2000. Bush narrowly won the popular vote in Florida, and in so doing, he won all of Florida's 25 electoral votes, which gave him enough electoral votes to win the election. The end. Some story, huh? Man, it was exciting. And it really put a spotlight on the Electoral College. Since the beginning, the Electoral College has had its fans and its detractors. Okay, now you're just messing with me, right? Anyway, during its long history, many have tried to eliminate the Electoral College from our political system, but to no avail. The main reason is because no one has come up with anything better. That said, there are compelling arguments both for and against the Electoral College. One of the arguments for the Electoral College is that by requiring a distribution of popular support, it makes sure that states with large populations don't have an unfair advantage. In other words, no one region of the United States provides enough electoral votes needed to win the presidency, so a candidate has to gather support from a broad range of states. Also, people for the Electoral College argue that it maintains the federal system of representation laid out in our Constitution. The House of Representatives was designed to represent the states according to the size of their population. The Senate was designed to represent each state equally, regardless of its population. And the Electoral College was designed to represent each state's choice for the presidency. In contrast, those against the Electoral College argue that the winner-take-all nature of the system makes it difficult for third-party or independent candidates to win enough electoral votes to become president. Needless to say, this ongoing debate will go on for a long time, but there's no denying that just the mere fact that the Electoral College is still around, more than 200 years after it was established, is a tribute to the genius of our founding fathers. Well, as you've seen, the Electoral College is a complex yet intricate part of our election process. The more you learn about it, and the more you get involved, the better prepared you'll be when it's your turn to vote. Hope you had fun, and remind your parents to vote.